Today I want to talk about a 5-point checklist or a 5-point system I created to help with cello playing position. I remember when I started playing cello, there'd be times from day to day where the cello itself just felt different. Everything felt foreign, and I was super frustrated a lot of the time because cello playing is a three-dimensional activity, and you have your muscle memory that you use, but then you also have a kind of a spatial memory of where positions are, where the instrument is, and we need to figure out a way to feel comfortable with the instrument so that every time we sit down, we don't feel like we're rediscovering where everything is. So without further ado, here are my 5 steps to establish a good cello position. Step 1 of the checklist is to sit down with your equipment ready. All right, what does that mean? That means establishing a protocol so that we get our equipment from the case all the way to where we're sitting and where we're playing on the stand without anything bad happening. I've unfortunately seen this happen a couple times where someone puts their bow on their seat and then they, hurry over, get their instrument, sit back down, and you hear that horrible crunch of the wood either cracking or snapping. And I've also seen someone step on their bow because they put it down on the floor just for a second, but it was out of their normal protocol. They forgot about it and they stepped on it. So we want to establish a protocol so that we're safe and we're fully prepared. The first thing I do is I put whatever sheet music I'm going to work on the stand, and if I'm going to use like a metronome app or a tuner, I put that on as well. Then what I do is I get my bow and I tighten it. I check to see if it needs rosin. If it does, I rosin it and I put it on the stand. Then I go back and get the cello, sit down with it, get the end pin going, and now everything's where it needs to be and I'm ready to start playing. Okay, so in step 2 of the checklist, I'm going to talk about where the cello connects with the knee, the left knee, and this is now starting to talk about ways we can sort of physically memorize the orientation of the cello so that we kind of always get it into the same position with regards to our body, and so we always feel comfortable. So what I do is I look at the bottom of the C-bout here, and the back corner is I've just sort of memorized kind of where it fits. It just sort of rests right on the inside of my leg adjacent to my knee. And it helps me know that, if the end pin is too short, I might scoot forward to meet the cello. And then as you can see, it's going to change. It'll hit a different part of my knee. And if the end pin was longer or I sat in a different chair and it made the end pin feel too long, the whole cello would probably move up and it would change where it touches. So that's one thing I used starting as an adult to kind of feel comfortable, is I would sort of memorize this corner particularly of the C-bout here, where that fit. With the right leg, it's a little different. It can touch the cello. I know very important, prominent cellists who advocate not touching the cello at all, I think, to help kind of alleviate tension and keep better balance. But the main thing for you to know is that the right leg is not really a player when it comes to our body and the setup of the cello, in my opinion. So the third part of the checklist is the positioning of the C peg on your cello. Now, my cello, it's a little different because I bought a posture peg, which is basically you use an Allen wrench kind of adapter, and that tightens and loosens the string, but it keeps it so that if I sat currently with my cello in this position, the C peg would be going through my brain essentially. So this allows me to have the cello where I want without having to duck my head forward. But if you don't have a posture peg, let's talk about what can help with the C peg. So most people, since they have this peg, it'll be behind your neck, and a lot of cellists will sort of memorize where that peg touches the back of the neck, and that kind of helps them. They kind of lean back into it. You see them do it, and they'll like sort of nestle into where the peg is, and that helps them align themselves with the rest of the fingerboard. So if you think about it, the knee is kind of the left knee is taking care of the bottom part of the cello, and then the C bout, or I'm sorry, the C peg is helping align the upper half of the cello. And so then you get the general orientation of the cello kind of aligned with however you want it with your body. So now I already talked about this. The reason I got the posture peg is I was having to move my neck forward, and that was causing, some pain and bad posture. So I removed it and got the posture peg. But if you don't like leaning forward and you feel like the C peg is doing that to you, the other solution, which is what I used to do, if you take the end pin and you rotate it towards your right leg, you'll see that what it does to the peg is it goes in the opposite direction. So if this is the end pin and this is the scroll, if we're sitting, if we move the end pin a little bit towards the right foot, it creates an angle that makes the peg box go away from your head, and that's another way to get some clearance. And it's perfectly fine to play with the fingerboard a little further away from your face. So that's another solution to what to do about this peg box. It's gonna happen eventually where you sit down to play cello and it's never felt super comfortable, and then suddenly you're practicing and things just feel beautiful. They feel great. You just feel like you're one with the instrument for some strange reason all of a sudden. First off, it's super exciting when that happens. But what I would say is that's the perfect time to take inventory of all the things we're talking about right now. So you have that practice session and man, just everything felt balanced. I wasn't like fighting my own body to play. It's great. Okay, that's a time to stop. And if I'm playing, like for myself, I play in front of a mirror. If I'm playing in front of a mirror, I'm taking my cell phone camera and taking a picture because I want to see how the cello looks compared to where my body is sitting. If you don't have a camera or you don't have a mirror in front of you, that's when I'd literally feel the C bout on my knee. How far away is it from my knee? Kind of get that feeling. And then maybe today, when you look in the mirror, or if you just notice, oh, that's interesting. Today, I get instinctively, I kind of moved the fingerboard away from my face more, and that just seemed to open everything up. It felt better. Or the opposite, it's been getting further and further for some reason. Now I'm closer. Also to check, where is it touching on my chest? I generally aim for the solar plexus between the pec muscles. That's kind of a good spot to have it rest, but maybe today it's a little bit higher or a little bit lower and it just feels great. So those are the kind of things you want to take into account along with the cello's angle, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. Okay, so step 4 is we're going to talk about the cello's angle. We've got it, we figured out where it's touching our knee. We've got our C peg sort of situated and figured out. We're generally aware of where it's touching our chest. And now we're going to talk about the angle, which is, if you look at your torso, and we'll just make the bow stick as the torso, then the face plate of the cello, that's the angle we're talking about. So it's the angle at which the cello meets your torso, which is more or less vertical in this case. I mean, if you lean back to play or you lean forward to play a little bit, that still is going to be an angle created. Okay, so I'm going to switch angles, camera angles, not cello angles, to show you a little bit more what I'm talking about. Okay, I've reoriented myself so you can see the cello's angle a little bit better. I'm guessing I have about a 40 or 45 degree angle going on, and that's about what's comfortable for me. So let's talk about the different types of angles you could achieve and how that would go about. You'd go about doing that. So if you lower the end pin a bit, that's going to cause to touch the same part of your chest that would bring the bottom part of the cello to you further, and so it will end up tilting the cello more vertically. And you'll see old cellists like Fournier, not old, but from previous generations, that was kind of the style back then. And you could find soloists today who still sit with a pretty short end pin. There's benefits to that. There's drawbacks. So I would just go by what feels comfortable. The other thing you can do that a lot of cellists do, especially cellists who are kind of on the taller side or have longer legs, is you would make the end pin much longer, and this, still touching the same part on your chest, is kicking the bottom of the cello out and creating almost a little bit of a kind of a tabletop effect. Rostropovich was famous. He had actually a bent end pin, but that created even more of a tabletop. So, and he's arguably the best cellist to ever live. So there's obvious benefits to that for comfort. Whatever is comfortable for you, and I would experiment, figure that out, and then try to reproduce it when you sit down. So it's because if you just obsess, like I used to obsess about how long my end pin was, and then it hit me one day that if I go and sit in different chairs, that end pin doesn't mean the same thing. So it's not really about how long my end pin is or how long my rock stop is, but it's about what is the angle of the cello in relation to my body, no matter how I'm sitting. While we're on the subject of angles, there's one other angle for the cello that you would want to take note of when you're trying to figure out your ideal cello playing position, and that's this kind of horizontal angle. So if I don't move the end pin at all, and I just kind of rotate the cello, it creates its own axis and its own set of angles. What a lot of cellists, in my opinion, do is they'll either have kind of a squared off playing position where it just looks like kind of a straight runway, like an airplane's going to take off, or for cellists with kind of shorter arms, a lot of them like to tilt the cello so that the A string side of the cello raises. And the idea behind that is that if you place your bow at the tip, that helps the cello meet the bow so that it's not as much of a stretch. If I did the opposite, to make sure I don't have a crooked bow, I'd really have to extend my arm. So I would recommend trying to keep the cello somewhat straight, or to maybe angle it just a little bit towards the A string to make the A string playing position, which I think is hardest for beginners and early cellists. I think that's the hardest position, is at the tip on the A string, so making that easier is probably a good thing. So that fourth checklist point was kind of maybe 2 or 3 points. But the fifth point of the checklist is kind of a left-hand glide. And what I mean by that is if you take your hand, you take the fingers of your left hand and hook them on the inside of the A string, but not pressing down at all. You hook them on the inside of the A string, and then you just glide them along. Have fourth finger down here leading the pack, and then naturally, as your hand opens up, just let it open and slide your third finger, do it on each of the strings. The idea is, as you're sitting, you don't want to have to adjust your skeleton to reach different parts of the cello. So if I sit in a place, maybe this feels great right here, but if I had to play in first position, I feel like there's a lot of meat I have to move to get back here. And I'm having to kind of contort my body to reach this position here. So that's probably not ideal. Likewise, I could find a position that feels great here, maybe something like this, but then to play up higher, I have to really, I feel like I'm hurtling over the shoulder of the cello to get there. And that's probably an indicator that it's not a good playing position either. Even if you have no intention whatsoever of playing notes this high up yet, I still would use it as an indicator of a balanced, good cello position. So you just do these little left-hand glides. I think this, of all the steps, is the one that you can probably eliminate quickly. But for when you're really just first trying to establish that cello playing position, I found this really helped. And making sure that I don't feel like I'm doing too much of this to get over the hump of the cello, and I don't feel like I'm having to move too much to get back on the A string in half position, say. I hope that helps. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and good luck.